Welcome to Presario Ventures Investor Education Series. We thank everyone for joining us this evening. I know there are a lot of current investors on tonight. Hello, we're glad that you're here. For those of you that are new to Presario, just wanted to point out we do have a growing real estate portfolio throughout the state of Texas. We have a new offering that was just available that is now on waitlist just outside of Houston in the Kingwood area. If you are interested in learning more details about this and getting on our waitlist, please reach out to me directly. I'm Robin Massey, the Director of Client Relations here at Presario. I'm your point of contact for any general questions and to assist you throughout the investment process. Well, I'm honored tonight to introduce our guest speaker. I have the privilege of working with Tom directly. I see him in action on a day-to-day basis and sometimes wonder if he's a robot with all the things that he can get accomplished in one day. If it wasn't enough to be a practicing orthopedic surgeon and an owner of a private equity firm, Tom decided to take the venture of writing a book. Tonight, he joins us here to share in his passion, which is actually sharing his own knowledge with others. This has been quite a treat for me to see this process unfold of his conception of this idea to editing and final publishing of this great book. So without further ado, I introduce Dr. Tom Burns, surgeon, entrepreneur, real estate expert, and author.
This particular time is something that Darren and I like to do. You know, we always say we founded Presario on education, because we know if you just educate people, it helps them move forward. It helps us move together. Obviously, it helps us all work together as investor group and sponsor group. And it's our preference, actually, not for me to be talking to this little lens, but to be talking to you in person. Things will change eventually. One day we'll be able to shake hands again. There's a ton of you out there that I'd like to meet. So I hope when we get the chance, if you're in Austin, you'll come see us, or we'll be out in various towns to meet you at some point. So anyway, this is not a monologue. It's going to have to be a monologue because there's nobody here to ask questions. But please, if you've got questions as we're going along, ask it. Put it in the chat box, and Robin will stop me. Particularly if I get boring, she'll stop me and say, "Hey, somebody really does have a question." She'll stop us. We'll start that question, and we'll just take it down whatever rabbit hole that takes us. So I guess we're going to talk about the book. I wrote this book. It's called Why Doctors Don't Get Rich. I'll tell you who gave me that title later, but the first question might be, why did I write this book? The simple and short answer is that a lot of you know a friend of mine's Robert Kiyosaki. Robert and I were sitting down at lunch one day on some terrace outside in Phoenix, and I asked him about his next book. I said, "What's your next book?" And he told me, because he spits books out like a rabbit has babies, and he's got a new one coming out, by the way. It's about capitalism. He just called me the other day, turned it into the publisher. So another good Kiyosaki book coming out. Anyway, I asked him what his next book was, and he told me, and he goes, "You should write a book." And I said, "What do you mean? Why?" He said, "You got a story, you ought to write a book." So me being the one I'll do anything, it's like, okay. So I decided to do it. Most of us want to write a book. They say that 80% of people would really like to write one, and about 1% really do. So it was my turn. I had no idea what I was doing, decided to write a book. So before we get into that and kind of the process, I'll give you a little compacted story of mine, which kind of explains the book. It explains why I wrote the book, kind of explains how I got where I am. I've done enough podcasts and stuff that some of you probably don't want to hear the whole story. So the compacted version is that, as Robin said, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, been doing that for 30 years. And early on, right before I started being a doctor, I was with the people training me in residency. And I was listening to the doctors. They weren't all that happy. And for some reason, some little bird, some little voice, an angel, whatever it was, sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You ought to keep an eye on, you ought to take notice of this." So I did, and I sort of realized that maybe I needed to do something outside of medicine just to try to make my life a little better. I was always one of those guys that didn't want somebody telling me what to do. I always wanted to sort of have my own choices, and I thought by having maybe some income coming in from elsewhere that would give me that opportunity. I don't know if that little angel or bird has ever come back to me. I wish it had come to me when Bitcoin was $1 and Tesla was $10, but that didn't happen. So my wife says I'd miss a hurricane if I didn't see it on the Weather Channel. So anyway, that's what happened. So I just started. I had zero training. Kind of lesson number one. I went through school. I took no financial classes. I just did what we all do to get through med school. So I had zero financial classes. I could add 2 + 2, which is about all you need to know math-wise to do real estate. And if you need more, you can always hire somebody. But I kind of fell on real estate and started learning about it, started doing it a little bit, starting small, just like everybody does. Great quote I heard from a Navy SEAL the other day was that everybody has a first day. And I had my first day in real estate, not knowing anything. And I get that question a lot, how do you start? And I just started by diving in. So jumped in, dove in, made some mistakes. Things did okay over time. And just sort of with persistence and time, time will make anybody look smart. So it just made me look that way because real estate started doing pretty well. And it started shaving off little bits of expenses from my life. And this is part of what the book's about, is that you don't even have to replace your income. It just started taking little bits of expense off of my plate. And by doing that, I had to do less of the unpleasant things that I might have had to do in my job. So I slowly would eliminate things I didn't like. I enjoyed my job. I enjoy it to this day. And it happened slowly. Eventually I reached a point where my passive income, my real estate income, and wherever else it was coming from, eclipsed what I needed as an orthopedic surgeon. It made orthopedics a lot more fun. I began working a lot less, but kept doing it for a good decade longer. I still did it today. It may be a different story next week, but I'm still working as of today. So that kind of happened, right? So that kind of brought us up there. I'll check my notes here and see what I was going to talk about. The point being is I knew nothing and I just learned. And what happened was a couple of things. I went to a conference. I went to a real estate conference in Phoenix, and I was just there to learn some stuff. And somebody heard I was from Austin, Texas, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I hear you're from Austin. I'm going to move there, my soon-to-be wife and I, and we'd like to have a connection." So we got to know each other. That person turned out to be Darren Davis, who's the other principal of Presario Ventures. And so if you put yourself out there, you go to learn, something always happens. If you say yes to an opportunity, something good always seems to happen. Another time I felt that I had kind of maxed out what I could learn from books and doing the little bit of real estate I was doing. I wanted to sort of up my game. So I went to somebody that really had a bigger game than me. He was a friend of mine. I said, will you teach me what you know? I ended up kind of learning from him, working for him for free. That ended up creating a very large medical center, a hospital, a big business. That was a real positive thing for me. So if you're always trying to move forward and getting better, that has tried to work for me. I don't know if I've gotten better every day, but I always want to try to be a little better version of me tomorrow than I am today. So just keep pressing on. I've got some people that I help mentor, and the question is always how to get started. And my answer often is, what do you like to do? Whatever it is, just go do it, because you'll make some mistakes, you'll figure out how to do it. When I answered her own question, she said, I'm fearful of getting started. And within a month, she had just jumped in and was no longer fearful. So just keep going. You will always have some sort of fear. To this day, I always have fear when we do certain things. Write the book. So anyway, that's kind of my story. I was lucky enough to connect up with Darren. A lot of I picked up a little purple book one day and got to meet Robert Kiyosaki, and we became friends. And so through all these connections with him and with Darren and with my other partner, my life has grown by being connected to those guys. So when Robert said, write a book, I didn't think I had that much of a story. Hopefully you think I have somewhat of a story, but I decided to just sit down and write. That's another thing I knew zero about. I knew nothing. I'd read books, right? So, I kind of researched a little bit, and I called some people. I had a publisher for a short time, but didn't like their plan and they didn't answer emails. So I ended up doing it myself. And I just started writing. They ask you to do an outline first. And so I did some kind of a crummy outline, had writer's block on that, and just ended up sitting down and starting to write just thoughts, just throwing things on the paper. So what really happened is I wrote the book and then created the outline after I wrote the book, just made sure they all matched up. But writing the books, it's interesting. It was first just a project to get a book written. That was it. A friend of mine said to write it, I was going to write it. Here's what happened so I wrote the book. I titled the book first. I didn't title it. Robert did. He said, why don't you call it Why Doctors Don't Get Rich? And I kept trying to find a better title, and I couldn't find one that I liked better. I worked a little harder on the subtitle, a little more of a positive subtitle. But so I started writing the book, and this is where why I wanted to tell the story is that I really enjoyed medicine. Medicine was good to me. Private practice, we kind of ran the show. Life was good. Made enough income, and then did some real estate. So I thought that's what medicine was like. I started doing my research, talking to people, interviewing folks to get the research and raw materials, and I found out that a lot of people weren't quite as happy in their job. I found out that a lot of them were not happy, and I didn't know that. I would speak to doctor groups, and people would come up and say, I thought I was trapped. I didn't know there was another way to get out of this. And so I never really wanted to get out of medicine, but I didn't know that close to 50% of the docs in the US, at least, one time or another wanted to quit. And if y'all are doctors, those stats, they kind of fade between 46 and 54% with some sort of burnout, which means they wanted to quit at some point. So I learned a lot about that. I learned that there was some good to be done. I basically got kind of a mission. I would like everybody else to enjoy medicine as much as I did. And that's the mission of the book. And so that's the one thing I learned. Another thing I learned was how to write. So I just wrote. I wrote stuff that I guess I've never written books. There was a bunch of stuff I wanted to write, right? And I wrote it. I had editors, and they'd help me. I had 3 different editors. So I would write a chapter, send it to my editor in California. She'd twist stuff around or ask questions, and I'd get a chapter. I'd write the next one. That's how we did each chapter. Then I stitched them all together, and I hired a developmental editor. I had 120 applications to be the developmental editor. Picked one eventually after interviewing about 15 of them. And we stitched the book together, moved a chapter here, there, looked at it again, had to change things. But what you may not know is that the process was well over a year. It took me 2.5 years to write this book. I wrote every word myself. You might say that's poor use of leverage. There are services out there that will interview you, write what you talked about on the interview, and then you can change it up. I will say it's a much more efficient way to write a book. I may write it that way next time, but I wanted the words to come from me because I was talking not just to doctors, but certainly to doctors primarily, and I knew the words, and I knew how they felt, and I knew what they'd been through. So I wanted the words coming from me. So that's why it took 2.5 years. But after I finished the last chapter, when I got the developmental editor, by then my attitude had changed, my thought process had changed. So I had to go rewrite every chapter. I edited every chapter before I sent it to the developmental guy, step by step by step. We put the thing together. I kept reading the manuscript. I didn't really like it. It was coming together, but I didn't really like it. I couldn't figure out why. And so I got some people to read it, and quite a few said it's too long, which I knew. You write it too long and you squeeze it down. So I got some comments from people, friends that would read it, and got enough, rewrote some things. Then I got a third editor in London to look at it, and good ideas came from each one. Somewhere along that process, I finally sat down and read the book as if I was a reader trying to get something useful and valuable out of the book. That's when I cut a bunch of junk out, and that's when it became a good book. So now I like my book. I hope you do or did, but I like it now. And so that sort of writing process took 2.5 years. Things change. I remember. So there was one point where I finished it. I came out and told my wife, it was a Friday, came out and told my wife, done, book's finished. It's ready to go, ready to go to layout. She goes, that's great. And I hike. I like to go out in nature. So the next day was Saturday. And I guess before we start that story, I had another gentleman who had written big bestseller, had looked at the book and given me some suggestions, but this was well into the development process, and it was really going to be hard for me to make those changes. It was too much hassle, so to speak. So I'm taking my hike thinking of how cool it was that I finished my book, thinking I've got to now send it out to a few people to read. I'm trying to think, what am I going to tell this guy who's a really well-known guy, real famous guy. I thought, what am I going to tell him? And I stopped dead in my tracks and thought, I can do this. So after finishing the book for, the first time or one of many times, I completely rewrote the book again, added things, changed it. So it was sort of a labor of love. And eventually it was a book that I was proud enough or at least tired of editing enough. I could edit that thing for 10 years. So I finally cut the umbilical cord and let that baby free. And we sent it to layout. It's the book that you've either read or might read. Please read it at some point. So that's kind of the process of writing the book. The rest is painful. You have to get logos. You have to get cover design. You have to get the layout right. You have to do the ebook. So it's all stuff I didn't know. I didn't know any of it. Just learned it on the fly, and people know what they're doing will teach you. So the final product eventually came out, and we launched it with almost zero marketing. I launched the book and then went to Turkey on vacation 9 days later. So I'm the world's worst marketer, but the book seems to be doing well. We're in 8 countries now, and sales are actually accelerating. So I'm pretty excited about that. So do we have questions?
Yes.
Yeah, good time.
Like specific to what you were just talking about, it says, who did you use to edit your book? Another question kind of on those same lines is, what is the role of a developmental editor that you were mentioning?
Good questions. So, like in the book, there's a section about networking, right? So I had a friend of mine who had written a book, and he had gone through a bunch of editors. So when I first needed somebody to look at my stuff, I said, who'd you talk to? He goes, well, I talked to these 3 people. I used editor number C, but here's A, B, and C. So I called and interviewed A, B, and C, and I picked A. She was a freelancer out of California. And I'll be happy to if somebody's writing a book, I'll be happy to give you her name. I continue to use her for some other stuff. And it was a great experience. Not real expensive, super fast, and great comments. So sometimes when you write, you forget you're writing from your brain pan. You're writing from your experience and your knowledge base, and you forget that you've got to explain things. And so she really helped me expand stuff and explain some things I was talking about. What was the second question?
Let's see. So that was the
developmental editor. Yeah. So that was the first editor. She was just sort of a copy editor. She helped with context, and we didn't worry too much about periods and commas and stuff like that. But it was more in context, more making sure it was a readable thing, and she'd correct some grammar if I messed it up, which was frequent. But so once we had a reasonable piece put together, the developmental editor is one that much more expensive. I picked the most expensive one because he said he was the best. He was good, and I use him as well. I use him again. So I've now got my little stable of editors that I use, and he read the whole thing, and we looked at it from 10,000 feet, and we did, it was like, I think this chapter really kind of belongs here. And he was right. It flows much better. So that was his job, was to make sure that it flowed through as an understandable story. He still did edits, maybe I ought to say it like this. And I'd probably take 80 to 90% of what my editors said. Sometimes it was just no. The people that read this are going to understand it better if I leave it this way. But I took 80 or 90% of their suggestions. It was a good process. I learned a lot.
I think you kind of already touched on this, but someone was asking how much you spent on marketing and publishing. If you want to indulge.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'm pretty sure I spent zero on marketing. I'm serious. I did the worst job. If I did this properly, I would have hired a company who would have had somebody interview me. We'd have knocked out a book in 90 days, and they'd had a whole marketing plan. That's $30,000 to $40,000 is what that price tag is. I paid zero and spent 2.5 years of my life on weekends and the occasional weeknight when I wasn't blasted from working too hard. I had 2 jobs at the time. So you can't write when you're not, you can't be creative when you're tired. So it was usually weekends. And so So I didn't spend, I really spend nothing on marketing. I put it up on Amazon and said goodbye. I went to Turkey. It was terrible, terrible marketing job. But the publishing, geez, the book itself, not counting the website and everything, just the book itself was probably $20,000, maybe. All told, everything was $50,000. Just blunt, I'll tell you, that's website. But that's because I don't know what I'm doing. I picked a web guy that somebody said this is a good guy. It was terrible, but that was $10,000 later. I had to get somebody else redo the website. So if any of y'all saw the early website, you'll know why I changed. But yeah, honestly, with editors and trademark attorneys and more editors and to do the cover, I used 99 designs. That's a thing. Yeah, I used 99 designs, but I put the top price on it and went through 150 cover designs to finally pick one, that sort of thing. So did that, do logos. So yeah, it was honestly, it was about 50 grand.
Kind of shifting, here was a question this was the first question, but we'll come back around to it. At what point in your career did your interest shift from being a physician and taking patients to being more real estate investor focused?
That's a good question. I'll give you a weird answer though. It never shifted. The interest never shifted. It just added. So I did the two in tandem. I always loved seeing patients, and I tell you, when you don't have to see certain ones, it gets a lot nicer. So each one fed the other. As physicians, we have, and not everybody on this call is a physician, but if you make a good income, physicians make a good income compared to the rest of the world. In the research I did, it's still the number one job, so to speak, kind of overall, depending on who does it. Glassdoor, I think, did that study. But so we have the blessing, so to speak, of typically having some discretionary income that we can use to invest. So that was a blessing on that side. But when I would invest it, when the real estate started paying me money into my mailbox without me having to do any work, that started adding to my doctor income, and those things worked together. And so the scales just did this. If I was working really hard and doing all the unpleasant things in the world and my real estate was making zero, as the real estate got better, the doctor world did this. I started just eliminate things. So first thing I eliminated was Friday afternoon office. I was a young doctor. I operated on Friday mornings, and you finish operating. If you're a surgeon, you feel good. You feel like you did a good job helping people. And that lasts about 3 seconds when you've got office for the next 4 hours on Friday afternoon. It was painful, and everybody knew young Dr. Burns was in the office. So I got everything. It was great for business, but I would find myself doing emergencies at 5 o'clock in the afternoon every Friday. So, so that's the first thing I cut out. I thought I was Elon Musk, man. I had 2.5 day weekend every week, and it was awesome. It was just that little taste, So I started getting addicted to being able to do things I wanted to do. So I know that's a funky answer, but the two have remained kind of close together. The real estate's fun. It's nice. And I love helping investors. I love watching a place come out of the ground from nothing. It's fun. And hanging out with the team here, meeting people, meeting investors, meeting other brokers, meeting other partners. It's fun. I like people. But in the office, it's the same thing. I get to meet people. I just, cure financial pain in this office. I cure knee pain in the other office. So I can't say that one is taken over with the other. Maybe next week I might tell you something different. I'll tell you what I'm talking about later on. Any more questions?
Next question is, what type of real estate did you start out in, and how did it grow to where it is now?
You bet. So I had a couple accidental real estate deals that they don't count. I bought a home lot that I was going to build on, and turned out not to be the lot to build on. And I sold it 2 years later for double the price. So that was just dumb luck. Sold it to a famous biker who won the Tour de France 7 times or 8 times. But he might have been stripped. Anyway, That was my first real estate deal, but that didn't count. When I started actively investing in real estate, I had, and I'll tell you what I did. I worked as a doctor. I paid my student loans, paid my parents back the money they gave me because I was broke when I got to Austin. And I paid some of my house. Actually, I paid all my house. Then I started investing. I didn't want my family to suffer for me making mistakes. So I want to have a solid base. I bought a student condominium, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath condominium in West Campus at the University of Texas. It was there. It was something to do. I had a relative who wanted to move down there. So I thought, I'll just buy a condo and you can live in it. Well, that thing immediately cash flowed. I bought another one. I bought another one. I bought another one. I bought a bunch of them. I got so good at the West Campus market that I knew I could just look at the complex. I would know what the rents were going to be and what the cost was going to be. I knew if it was going to make money. They were, as always, 20 years, over 20 years ago. The prices weren't quite what they are now. Neither were rents. But, one story, I got so good at that, and I tell this one a lot, you may have heard it, but I was sitting on a Sunday night reading the paper. Back then, you could look at real estate on the paper, and there's a little, condos and apartments section. And I looked at a little ad, and I told my wife, I'm buying this tomorrow. And she said, how do you know? You've never seen it. And I said, it's West Campus. I know the complex. I know the market. Somebody's either made a mistake or it's covered with algae and roaches. And I had an office full of patients on 38th Street, and this place was on 30th Street, same crossroad. So I went out the back door of my office, drove 8 blocks, met the broker, wrote an offer on the spot, got the condo. It was basically a downtown broker doing a favor for a friend who was in Houston, who was a father who had bought this condo for his daughter to spend 4 years at the University of Texas. She graduated. Well, he didn't realize that the market had done this in the last 4 years. So I got the place. It was one of those no money down deals. I got the place, got it reappraised, and they paid me $1,000 at closing. So that's what helps to learn your market. So that was where I started. Over time, because I had so many of them, people started bringing me deals. People started coming in wanting to partner. I had by then started running into Darren a lot. Darren was in Austin doing real estate and getting pretty well known. We kept bumping into each other and started doing things. And so we did an apartment complex on campus. It just kind of started growing from there. It was also in that time where I went to my sort of other mentor and said, please teach me what you do. And that's where I kind of learned my medical office development expertise or knowledge, put it that way. Started small, started with a little condo. And I still own that condo, and it still pays out every month.
All right, next question. How concerned are you that we may be at the top of the real estate cycle for multifamily?
Yeah, it seems like, how can it go any further, right? People keep asking me when are interest rates going to go up and when's the crash going to occur? And I tell them 2017, because that's what I thought. So I don't know the answer. I recently saw something in one of the trade publications that, our buddies in Washington are going to keep kicking that can down the road and trying to keep best they can, try to keep interest rates where they are. We're still underbuilt for apartments, and cities like Austin and Dallas and Houston and Atlanta and Raleigh, North Carolina and Jacksonville, Florida and Tampa, St. I could go on forever. They're growing like crazy. It's just like, it's like everything's just falling out of the north and out of each coast into the southeast, Phoenix, southwest area in Texas. So what I mean by that is, multifamily is driven by jobs, and we have jobs coming into Texas like crazy for now. So I'm not worried, because I know it's going to happen. It always does. Life is waves. It's going to happen. I'm just not smart enough to know when. It looks like we have quite a good runway for the next several years. I think the government's going to do what it can to keep people having jobs. Any kind of black swan can happen. Certainly COVID was a black swan. Hopefully we'll come out of that. But yeah, we've been at the top for a long time. And I expected sometime near the end of this year for something to happen, but things seem to be changing, and I think we may still have some runway. I certainly hope we do.
Next question is, do you invest in the stock market relative to the housing builders? I'm sorry.
So the only good stock move I ever made, or the only right stock move I ever made, is I pulled my money out in 2008 when it was about 14,000, 13 or 14. And then wasn't astute enough to ever put it back in. I have $0 in the stock market. So I'm not the right guy to talk to. I'm not a big fan of paper assets. And like, you know, you've heard my friend Robert, the same thing, he didn't like paper either. But certainly it's manipulated. I'm not smart enough to know who or how they're manipulating it. And, you know, things happen fast in the stock market. It's certainly a great place to keep your money. I've got relatives that are financial planners. Probably if I was smarter or had more money, I would have something in the market somewhere, but I've got nothing in there now.
Let's see, has anything changed since you released your book?
It has changed a little. I was, for various reasons, people would have me, you know, they would like to have me on podcasts to do some things, mostly talk about real estate and, you know, sometimes to talk about, you know, my relationship with the guy out there in Scottsdale, but that has certainly picked up. But the thing that's really changed is now I get calls from all over the world now, mostly the United States, but I get connections from all over the world from people that have read the book. It's fun, it's gratifying, it's great for the ego, you know, if they like the book. Haven't had anybody mean yet, but somebody will not like the book, and somebody has, I'm sure. But it's given me connections to a lot more people. There's been such a volume of it that it's probably changing. You know, I guess I'll tell you what's changed. It's changing so much that there's a lot of people that want to connect. And I certainly enjoy teaching. I don't know if I consider myself a teacher, but I like helping people get farther along. And I've done that my whole life with students and residents and people following me. And so it's giving me a chance to fulfill my way of serving folks. You know, as a doctor, I can serve a patient one at a time, and I love that. And I'll tell you, I've been doing the orthopedic work almost for free for the last 3 to 4 years. What's changed is this Friday, I'm actually officially going to probably retire from being a doctor. So some of you may know, some may not, but that's hard. That was a long time decision. It took me 6 months to make that decision, but that's the main thing that's changed. I think I'm going to go from 3 jobs to 2 jobs now. So that's one thing. So that'll be nice. I might sleep once in a while, because when I had 3 jobs, I would start at 5:30 in the morning. I didn't finish till late at night. So that's a change.
All right, this kind of rolls back to what you just said, that you're not in stocks. So what do you consider being truly diversified?
That's a good question. Okay. So if you're major diversified, you might own some stock. I must say, yeah, having some exposure to the stock market, stocks, bonds, mutual fund, whatever kind of your thing is. I think certainly you need to have some hard assets. We're big hard asset guys, and within hard assets, you also can diversify. There's a multitude of asset types. You can just own straight land, or you can own improved property. It can be in the hospitality world, the industrial world, storage. Office is not so great right now. Maybe a good time to buy office, but they're not sure when it's going to come back. So try to kind of get some of those, you know, get something different within the real estate world. If you want to really go all the way, then buy some commodities, get you some art, some gold, get some Bitcoin or whatever. You know, I love cryptocurrency. I wish I had known about it a long time ago. Don't know where it's going to go. Own part of a business. So that's kind of going through the 4 things: paper assets, real estate, commodities, and businesses. So you try to get things that are going to do this. Gold supposedly is going to take care of us when inflation goes up. I was not a big gold guy until several years ago. Just decided maybe I like it a little better now. So that's my version of diversity. You know, you don't want one thing to take everything down.
Has your thoughts on a good investment changed after 2020?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's been, even before that, it's kind of been gradual. But, you know, we've watched as cap rates compress. You know, back in the day, it was like, I'm not going to do anything if it doesn't give me a 12% immediate cash on cash return. I remember that back in the day. That's when cap rates were 8, 9, 10. So now you're selling an apartment complex before it's 100% full for a 3.9 cap. So I have to adjust my own expectations. So now instead of looking for 12 or 10, now you're looking at 8 to 10. Sometimes you start at 6. So I've lowered my own expectations, and with that, we've kind of had to educate our investors that things do change. So, but it's not changed as far as hard assets. I still like real estate. So focused, but I like real estate, but I like to keep an open mind. Things change, technology changes, and I think the blockchain program and cryptocurrency, I'm not trying to sell anything, I'm just saying that's where I've started to do some research, because I think that's going to be a world changer. I think that may be how we buy our real estate in the future. So that was a little bit of a tangent.
Let's see. Do you trust cryptocurrency?
Oh man, I know so little about it. I'm like a tadpole trying to grow into a frog. I'm just a kindergartner. But the smart people say that there's hundreds of them, thousands of however many of them out there. And of course, just like the internet, a bunch of it's going to fall away and not be good. Somebody will rise. Might not even be the ones that are out there. They're saying they think as a store of value, they think Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum will probably still stick around. But it's the Wild West. It just is the Wild West. So I think it's certainly going to change what we do. We don't exactly know how. You'll be able to buy your insurance from there. You can get loans from there. You can lend money. You can use it as digital currency. I think the governments are going to take up digital currency. What it does to what's going on in the private sector, I don't know. Certainly a lot of power in governments. The guys with the tinfoil hats said they'd have to shut the internet down. They can't shut down Bitcoin, but governments are pretty powerful. So that's my worry, is that they'll find a way to centralize it. It's the decentralized nature of cryptocurrency that makes it, the trustless system that's decentralized. More people's money rather than centralized government money, which is, guided more by political means, those sort of things.
What percentage of your portfolio is in cash fixed income?
Gotcha. Cash and cash equivalents is probably 5%, maybe a little higher now. We're trying to keep a little extra liquidity these days because the pipeline was a little bit clogged last year with crypto. It's clogged a little bit last year with COVID, and so we didn't stop working. So we continue to build relationships, and I think 2021 is going to be an exciting year. And so Darren and I need to keep our liquidity handy so that the lenders like us. So I'm upping the liquidity right now.
This was from Richard. He says, congratulations on your retirement.
Thanks.
He did the same, it looks like 2 years ago, and has really enjoyed the retired life.
Way to go.
What are your plans?
So I tell people I'm just going from 3 jobs to 2. I will die doing a deal or talking to somebody, because I talk too much and I love to do deals. So I just feel that, you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotten. So I always want to try to learn new things. So I'm going to go down to my 2 jobs. My main job, my focus, and most of my passion goes into Presario, where we're sitting now. But because of the book and because of it has sort of brought me into more of the education space. So we are starting a podcast sometime this summer, YouTube channel, those sort of things. I never thought I'd do that stuff, and I don't know anything about it. So it'll probably show when we start it, but those kind of things are going to start. And try to at least get the message out to as many people that want to listen, see if I can do some good.
This is probably our last question, because we're kind of running out of time here, but if you have anything else. This was a question about someone, I guess they were kind of inquiring, if you had someone that has read your book and then has jumped into saying yes and investing in, I think real estate specifically is what they were kind of referencing here,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the fears and triggers that they had to overcome to take that first step.
That's a great question. I kind of alluded to it before, because we're all fearful. Without fear, there'd be no courage, right? It's just action in the face of fear is what courage is. So I personally found, and I tend to give this advice, is to do some sort of action and do it in a small way. You know, you can test things, go small. I'm doing the same thing with the crypto world. I don't know my head from whatever. And so I go small so I can learn the process. So that's one, go small. Two, find somebody that's been there. Ask them. That's what I did years ago. Hey, you've been there. Will you teach me what you know? I mean, I'm just kind of living, kind of giving the same advice of what I lived. So ask somebody that's been there. Partner with some, find your own Darren, partner with somebody. It's awesome. Those are good ways to get over the fear. Then there's two of you. You can both be scared, but at least you only have to harbor half of the fear, right? You get a mentor, you know they've been there. You can start small, or you can start. And then if you want to do something on your own, pick something small, go start. I mean, worst case, they can't eat you. If you lose a little money, you might don't put your whole nest egg into something. Put something small. It's you know, I'm really good at losing money. We've never lost investor money at Presario. Tom Burns pretty good at losing money. I've done it a lot. Every oil investment I did, I lost money. So it just makes you stronger, makes you smarter, and you usually don't lose it all. So I hope that helped. Kind of three things: go small, get a mentor, get you a partner, go hang around people that have done it. Your courage will be boosted. I have a small group of folks that had that same question, and it wasn't anything I said. It was the whole group. It was the community that gave this person enough courage to go just do something. She came back a new person. I did it. I looked at a property. I underwrote it. You know, it's just things like that. So it's just the support of community. It helps. It helps to have somebody in there with you.
I think that's all we have. There are a few questions that we'll answer offline.
Okay.
But I think that's all I have up here.
So I don't have it. I wanted this to be mostly questions. You know, the book itself, for me, it was just designed to give anybody who read it some hope and some guidance on just kind of how to get started. You'll notice it talks about real estate because that's what I know, but man, you can start an online business. You can buy art, you can buy land. There's so many ways to make money. Real estate's not the only way, but it's like Robert's book did for me. I had already started. I was already doing things. Once I read the book, it's like, okay, I like what this guy said. It just gave me like a little turbo boost. So that's part of why I wrote the book. You'll notice it's all up here. It's all pretty much above the neckline. It's all thought process. There's not a whole lot of exactly what to go do because we're all different. You know, I don't know how many people are on this call, but pretty much each one of you has a little different thing that he or she likes. And you might really get into a bunch of single family homes or apartments or selling stuff on Amazon or trading crypto, you know, you name it. So it just helped to get you going. It helps you, hopefully it'll help you overcome your fear by doing some sort of action, which we just talked about. And it's got a few ideas on there and things you can do just to maybe kind of jumpstart you a little bit. So that was the last thing I wrote down. I just wanted to make sure you kind of knew why I wrote it and what the mission really was. And if you've got questions, please call. I love talking to folks, and I'm going to have more time after Friday. So anyway, you're the first ones to get the announcement, except for my patients. So it's now out in public. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Thanks for sticking around, guys. This is fun. I hope we get to do this in person. So until next time, this is Tom and Robin out from Presario.